That sound. The alarm. For most of us, it doesn't just start the day. It starts a race. A race against the clock. A race against traffic. A race against our own long list of things to do. And in that race, there's a voice. A familiar one. Almost like a parent's or a teacher's. Still echoing in your head after all these years. It says, hurry. You have to eat something. You can't skip the most important meal of the day. We hear that phrase, and we nod. It feels true. It feels ancient, like a piece of wisdom passed down through generations. We rush to the kitchen. We pour a bowl of cereal, or toast some bread, or grab a bar to eat in the car. We do it because we believe we are supposed to. We believe we are taking care of ourselves. We treat this rule, that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, like it was handed down from a mountaintop. But it wasn't. It wasn't a discovery from a wise doctor, or a secret from our ancestors. It's a line, a slogan. It came from a boardroom, not a medical journal. It was created a little over 100 years ago to solve a simple business problem. The problem was this: how do you sell people something they don't know they need? To understand how that happened, you have to imagine a world that seems almost alien to us now. Imagine a world without giant cereal aisles. A little over 100 years ago, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the American breakfast was a mixed bag. There wasn't one single rule for everyone. If you were a farmer facing a long day of hard physical labor, your morning meal was probably large. You needed the fuel. You might eat eggs, leftover meats, potatoes, and thick bread. It was a practical meal for a practical reason. But if you lived in a city, working as a clerk or a shopkeeper, your morning was different. Your work wasn't as physically demanding. Many people ate very little. A cup of coffee, maybe a roll or a piece of bread, or even just the leftovers from last night's dinner. For a lot of people, breakfast was an afterthought. It wasn't an event. It wasn't seen as the foundation of your entire day. Nobody was walking around feeling guilty for skipping it. Nobody thought they were committing some kind of health sin if they just waited until lunch to have their first big meal. The 3-meal-a-day structure that we take for granted wasn't yet set in stone. It was a flexible custom, not a rigid command. So what changed? How did we go from that world to ours, where a multi-billion-dollar industry rests on this one single meal? The story starts, as many of these stories do, with a man who had very strong beliefs. His name was John Harvey Kellogg. You probably know the name, but you might not know the man. Dr. Kellogg was not just a doctor. He was a man on a mission, a health crusader of the highest order. He ran a world-famous health spa in Battle Creek, Michigan, called the Sanitarium. It was a place where the rich and famous went to get well. Dr. Kellogg had a lot of ideas about health. Some of them seem strange to us now. He believed that most of America's health problems came from its diet. He thought rich, savory, and spicy foods were the enemy. He believed that foods like bacon and eggs were not just unhealthy, but that they led to sinful thoughts and behaviors. His solution was a diet that was the exact opposite: bland, simple, and plant-based. He preached the virtues of foods that were easy to digest, foods that wouldn't excite the system. He and his brother, Will Keith Kellogg, were constantly experimenting in the sanitarium's kitchens, trying to create new, healthy foods for their patients. One day, they were working with boiled wheat, trying to make a kind of dough. They were called away, and when they returned, the wheat had gone stale. Instead of throwing it out, they decided to put it through the rollers anyway. What came out wasn't a sheet of dough. It was a shower of thin, toasted flakes. They had accidentally invented the cereal flake. At first, this was just another health food for the patients at the sanitarium. It was bland, it was simple, it was exactly what Dr. Kellogg believed people should be eating. But his brother, Will, saw something else. He wasn't just a health idealist, he was a practical businessman. He saw something with the potential to be sold to the entire country. There was just one problem. They had invented a product, but they hadn't invented a reason for people to buy it. They were selling a solution to a problem that most people didn't know they had. Why would anyone choose to eat these bland flakes instead of a hot, savory breakfast, or instead of just having a cup of coffee? Will Kellogg knew he couldn't sell the flakes based on taste alone, especially after he had a falling out with his brother when he decided to add a little sugar to make them more appealing. He needed a bigger idea. He needed to change not just what people ate, but how they thought about eating. He needed to create a habit. This is where the marketing machine kicks into high gear. Will Kellogg launched one of the biggest advertising campaigns the country had ever seen. He poured millions of dollars into ads in magazines and newspapers. But he wasn't just selling a product. He was selling an idea. The idea was simple but powerful. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. The ads claimed that a light, grain-based breakfast was the secret to success. It would give you the energy you needed to be a productive worker. It would make your children better students. It was modern. It was scientific. To make the claims feel more official, Kellogg and other cereal companies at the time funded their own studies and paid doctors and health experts to endorse their products. They were turning a commercial product into a medical necessity. But Kellogg wasn't the only one who figured out this game. Around the same time, another industry had a problem. The makers of bacon found themselves with a surplus of cured pork. They needed people to eat more of it. They hired a man who would become known as the father of public relations, Edward Bernays. Bernays was a master of shaping public opinion. He understood that people don't trust advertisers, but they do trust authority figures, like doctors. So, he didn't create an ad that said, "Eat more bacon." That was too direct. Instead, he conducted a survey. He asked his agency's doctor to write to 5,000 other doctors, asking them a simple question: is a hearty breakfast better for a person's health than a light breakfast? Of course, the doctors agreed. A bigger meal provides more energy. About 4,500 of them wrote back saying yes, a hearty breakfast is better. Bernays then took this study and sent it to newspapers all across the country with a headline that read something like, 4,500 doctors urge Americans to eat hearty breakfasts. And what did the article suggest a hearty breakfast was? Bacon and eggs. Sales for bacon soared. It was brilliant and a little terrifying. Kellogg had convinced people that breakfast was the most important meal. Bernays had helped define what that meal should look like. Between the two of them, the modern American breakfast was born. It wasn't born from a timeless health tradition. It was constructed, piece by piece, by people with something to sell. They took the flexible, varied morning meals of the past and replaced them with a single, rigid rule. And we have been living with that rule ever since. This is where the story stops being about history and starts being about us. Because that rule didn't just stay on the pages of old newspapers. It got inside our heads. It became a part of our culture, and it created a new, quiet kind of anxiety. Breakfast guilt. Think about it. How many times have you heard it? You'll be hungry later. You won't be able to focus. It's the best way to start your day. These messages were repeated so many times by so many trusted sources that they burrowed deep into our collective mind. They became the voice of a responsible adult. The campaign was so successful that skipping breakfast began to feel like a failure. If you were a mother in the 1950s, providing a good breakfast was a sign you were a good parent. It was your job to make sure your children were fueled for success at school. Cereal companies targeted children directly with cartoon mascots and toys in the box, turning kids into tiny lobbyists who would pester their parents for the right kind of breakfast. If you were a working adult, eating breakfast was framed as a key to productivity. It was part of being a professional. Skipping it felt irresponsible, like showing up to work unprepared. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was about your identity. The marketing had created a problem where none existed before. The problem was the fear that you were doing something wrong by simply listening to your own body. The solution, of course, was to buy their product. Eat this cereal, this bacon, this toast, and you will be safe. You will be a good person. What made this so powerful was the use of medical authority. When a doctor tells you to do something, it feels different from when an advertiser does. A doctor's advice feels like a prescription. It feels objective and scientific. It feels like it's for your own good. By hiring doctors and funding studies, these companies borrowed that authority. They put a white lab coat on their sales pitch. This tactic effectively outsourced our own internal wisdom. Instead of asking our bodies, "Am I hungry?" we started asking an external authority, "What am I supposed to eat?" We lost touch with our own signals because we were told that a company in a faraway city knew what was better for us than we did. And this pattern is not a relic of the past. It's alive and well today. Walk down the grocery store aisle now. Look at the breakfast foods aimed at children. Many of them are packed with more sugar than a candy bar, but they are sold as a healthy start to the day because they are fortified with vitamins. It's the same playbook. Look at the yogurt section. You'll see sugary fruit. On the bottom, yogurts marketed as a wholesome, protein-packed breakfast. Look at the breakfast bars, which are often just cookies masquerading as health food. The language has changed a little. We hear more about protein and fiber and whole grains, but the underlying game is exactly the same. Create a sense of obligation around a meal and then sell people a convenient, often unhealthy product to fulfill it. The original lie just put on a new set of clothes. So if the rule was invented, if the guilt was manufactured, what do we do? Does this mean breakfast is bad? Does it mean we should all stop eating it? No, that's not it at all. The food was never the problem. The problem was the rule. The problem was the feeling of obligation. The real lie wasn't that eating a meal in the morning is an option. The lie was that it wasn't a choice. The lie was that a slogan created to sell cereal was a fundamental law of human health. Once you see that, once you truly understand that the rule was written by someone trying to sell you a box, the rule itself loses all its power. It just falls apart. The guilt disappears. The anxiety fades. You are suddenly free. You are free to stop asking, "What am I supposed to do?" and start asking a much simpler, much more honest question. Am I hungry right now? That's the flip. The entire conversation changes. It's no longer about following an external command. It's about listening to an internal signal. The authority shifts from a long-dead marketing executive back to you. And you start to notice something interesting. This story about breakfast isn't really just about breakfast. It's a template. It's a pattern you can see everywhere once you know what to look for. It's the story of how our modern world creates needs we never knew we had. Take diamond rings, for example. Before the 1930s, they were not the standard for engagements. They were one option among many, and not a very common one. Then, the De Beers Diamond Company, which controlled most of the world's diamond supply, had a problem. They had too many diamonds and not enough demand. So, they hired an advertising agency. The agency came up with a brilliant strategy. They began to link diamonds with the idea of eternal love and commitment. They gave diamonds to movie stars to wear in films. They sent lecturers to high schools to talk to young women about the importance of diamond engagement rings. And in 1947, a copywriter wrote a line that would change everything: "A diamond is forever." They didn't just sell a rock. They sold a tradition. They manufactured a cultural need so powerful that today, many people feel that an engagement without a diamond is somehow incomplete. It's the exact same pattern as breakfast. Create the rule, then sell the product that fulfills it. Or think about Listerine. For decades, it was sold as a general antiseptic, something you might use to clean a floor or a wound. It wasn't very successful. Then, in the 1920s, the company's new owners decided to focus on a different use. They found an obscure, medical-sounding term for bad breath: halitosis. Nobody worried about chronic halitosis. Most people had never even heard the term, but Listerine's new ads were designed to make them afraid of it. Their ads were full of sad, lonely people whose social lives were ruined by this secret problem. Their tagline was, "Often a bridesmaid, never a bride." They created a deep social anxiety and then positioned their product as the only reliable cure. They took a normal part of human life, gave it a scary-sounding name, and turned it into a condition that needed treatment. The pattern is always the same. Find a quiet insecurity, give it a name. Make it feel like a medical problem or a social failure. And then, present your product as the one and only solution. Breakfast, diamonds, Listerine. It's the same ghost in 3 different machines. So what does this mean for us tomorrow morning? This isn't about starting a new diet. It's not a call to embrace intermittent fasting or to follow some new set of food rules. That would just be replacing one external command with another. This is about something much simpler, and maybe a little harder. It's about learning to listen again. For a very long time, we have been trained to listen to the voices on the outside. The voice of the advertiser, the voice of the expert, the voice of the influencer. These voices are loud, confident, and always telling us what we should be doing to be healthier, happier, or more successful. But we all have another voice, a quieter one on the inside. It's the voice of our own body. It's the simple, physical signal of hunger. It's the subtle feeling of fullness. These signals are not trying to sell us anything. They are just true. The work, then, is not to find a better rule to follow. The work is to get quiet enough to hear the signals our bodies are already sending us. To build back that trust in ourselves. Trusting that you know when you're hungry. Trusting that you know when you're full. If you wake up tomorrow and you are genuinely hungry, then by all means, eat a wonderful breakfast. Enjoy it. But if you wake up and you're not hungry, maybe you just have a cup of coffee, and you do it without a trace of guilt. You do it knowing that you are not breaking a rule, but simply listening to yourself. You are letting your own body decide. It's a small act of rebellion against a century of noise. It's a quiet revolution that happens at your own kitchen table. Tomorrow morning, the alarm will go off. The day will rush in, just like it always does. The light will hit the window. The coffee will start to brew. But maybe something will feel different. Maybe that nagging voice in your head, the one that tells you what you should do, will be a little quieter. And in that quiet, you might notice something else. A simple feeling. A signal that is entirely your own. And you'll remember that the choice was never about what to eat. The choice was always about who gets to decide. You do. The meal was never the point. The freedom to choose was. And it has been waiting for you all along.